I would hope that one of the things that actually happens is that all the information gets released. So at the very least, then all Americans can judge these things for themselves. And instead, it's the opposite, where we have law enforcement incompetence, total incompetence at the very top, lots of questions that remain unanswered. And now the claim that are basically being used here by members of at the highest level of the United States government are acting in extraordinary ways that even after 9/11, they did not dream of doing. And so here is the latest. Pam Bondi, the United States Attorney General, the top lawyer for the United States government, now saying that there will be, quote, free speech, then there's hate speech, and there's no place for that, and that we will be going after, quote, hate speech. I mean, you know, the jokes write themselves. Take a listen.
There's free speech, and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society.
Do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people so we show them that some action is better than no action?
We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything. And that's across the aisle.
I mean, this is, if you yell fire in a crowded this is woke. I mean, that's, to borrow Gavin's attack when he's like, you sound woke, that's woke. That's literally what, like, BLM liberals said for the entirety of 2017 to 2021. They're like, well, there's a difference between free speech and hate speech. It's like misinformation. You are exactly right.
Coming from the Attorney General of the United States on Stephen Miller's wife's podcast on state media.
And I want to emphasize, that's why it's 10 times worse, because there's actually a big difference between some shitlib on Twitter saying that free speech does not give you a license to hate speech, and whatever this is, where the top lawyer, Attorney General of the United States of America, who can direct the FBI and has vast resources at her fingertips, saying that effectively we need some sort of hate speech enforcement. And so I could make all the jokes about being a lib and being woke and all of that, but I will turn to the words of Charlie Kirk. Let's put this up here on the screen. Quote, hate speech does not exist legally in America. There's ugly speech, there's gross speech, there's evil speech. All of it is protected by the First Amendment. Keep America free. And that's exactly it. And the very fact that she uttered those words just demonstrates the level of hypocrisy of all of these people who allegedly were so pearl clutched through the woker. I mean, I was too, okay? Let's be honest. But, I don't think a lot of people signed up for this. And, look, I've been relatively heartened. There's a lot of conservatives and others who have spoken out against this. But the point actually is they want her to rein it in just by saying hate speech. No, guys. The entire point is that from the beginning, the posture has basically been to be a liberal wet dream post-January 6th. Do you remember how many segments we did on our show after January 6th when, for example, there was an elite, effort to try and crack signal messages? Mm-hmm. They destroyed Parler. Completely unfairly and unjustly, destroyed that. They banned Trump from Twitter. They wanted to designate Republicans like, and including J6ers and others, as states or as domestic terrorists, so they could use Patriot Act designations against them. I mean, we fought like hell against all of this stuff. All of this is part of the same thing. I mean, they wanted hate speech laws at that time. They wanted mass censorship, and they got some of it to a certain extent. They wanted to use the full force of the government to basically enact the law against half of the country. And now, after revolting against that, talking about its unconstitutionality, about how bad it is, we are right back, literally right back, to where the liberals started on this entire thing. It's just so ironic. It fits, though, with a lot of this pattern. And, sorry.
I mean, I would just say, in fairness to us, I think we always recognize that many of the people on the right who were claiming to be such free speech warriors always had a tremendous blind spot. I mean, we always brought up the example of BDS. For example, we talked about, remember Mike Lindell launching his social media platform being like, it's free speech, but no cursing, no this, no that, no whatever. And so, I don't think we were so Pollyanna to believe that most of these actors were actually principled and genuine in their concerns over free speech. But it it is wild. Like, it is wild to see, for example, the Twitter files. What were the Twitter files about? It was all about the government using sort of like soft coercion, where they let's have a meeting and talk about these things. Here's an email of some people.
Or
I
flagging
think you need
tweets.
To, why don't you take a look at these sorts of people?
Yes, you're right.
Okay, that we objected to. You can go back and watch the tape about the way we objected to that, even, you know, on issues where, like, you know, COVID denialism, things that I oppose, but listen, you shouldn't have the government saying what you can say and what you can't say and putting pressure on these social media companies, and they know what the deal is because the government can come down hard on you and they've got these antitrust investigations, all of that. This is so much worse because it's the Attorney General, it's the President of the United States, it's Stephen Miller. This conversation right here is happening on Stephen Miller's wife's podcast, State Media. Similar sentiments expressed from, you know, the Stephen Miller on with JD Vance hosting Charlie Kirk's podcast. Again, so this, and you have an administration with a track record of crushing civil liberties, of being incredibly heavy-handed in their ability to try to crush dissent. So it is, you know, the worst of the woke era on steroids. And it's just crazy to see the very same language being recycled. We talked about this too with regard to like the crushing of pro-Palestine dissent, you know, all of the people who were, you know, against the safe spaces for college students suddenly like, oh my God, the microaggressions, like we need, you know, their safety, words are literal violence, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that language was repurposed in terms of crushing pro-Palestine dissent. And now you see them talking about consequence culture. Again, the exact language that was used by liberals during the peak of, you know, like woke cancel culture. And now you see this, again, the exact same language that some, like, you know, liberal professor or whatever would have used about hate speech being different from free speech. Charlie Kirk's message, and Charlie Kirk also, by the way, wasn't consistent on this in life, but his tweet is 100% correct. Listen, we can have a discussion as we did yesterday about where to draw the lines in terms of acceptable society and what conflicts with your job and what private companies are going to do, et cetera. We had that conversation. You can watch it yesterday. But when it comes to the government enforcement, the First Amendment is about protecting specifically offensive speech, because it's not controversial if you're saying just like hugs and kisses and love all around. When it matters is when you're saying something that is provocative, that is controversial, that is potentially offensive, that threatens or offends those in power. That's when the First Amendment matters. And we, I think, have tried to be pretty consistent in the way that we've applied that across the board.
Absolutely. I have tried a lot, and I've always felt as if it was a bit of a joke, but it's especially egg on the face for anybody who spoke out about this and then is not doing so when the top attorney general, lawyer, person with immense power to ruin any of our lives says this stuff publicly. And by the way, it was 10 times worse later on. It's not as if she backtracked all that much, because literally hours later, she appeared on Fox News to demand that people, Office Depot workers, I think, workers who refused to print posters with Charlie Kirk's picture for a vigil, she basically said, we can prosecute you for that. Let's take a listen.
That's horrific. It's free speech, but you shouldn't be employed anywhere if you're going to say that. And employers, you have an obligation to get rid of people. You need to look at people who are saying horrible things, and they shouldn't be working with you. Businesses cannot discriminate. If you want to go in and print posters with Charlie's pictures on them for a vigil, you have to let them do that. We can prosecute you for that. I have Harmeet Dillon right now in our civil rights unit looking at that immediately, that Office Depot had done that. We're looking at that.
Have to print the poster? No, you don't, actually. Also, Office Depot fired those people, which they're, you know, I guess that's their right to do. But it's a civil rights complaint now? You have to print the poster. Again,
or we're going to prosecute you.
I will not take a lecture. I will not stand for this after watching, I think correctly, and we've debated it before, it's like that masterpiece cake thing. Oh, you gotta bake the cake for the gay couple. No, you don't, actually. And they did the exact same thing. They filed a civil rights complaint, complete bullshit. Any private business has the right to basically do whatever they want as long as they are not specifically discriminating based upon the code of the civil rights era. Now, we can all debate the gay thing in particular, but if you held the position, which I absolutely 100% do, that the guy did not have to do a goddamn thing for those people, I would hold the exact same position here. And it's especially galling when the Attorney General is basically saying saying they're going to use the Civil Rights Code to go after employees for saying that they did not want to print that poster. Now, here's the thing. It's very different. If the company says you violated company policy by refusing to do this, that's actually one thing. And fine, you could be fired for that, of course. If you have internal protocol of we have a standard, the only things that we won't print are this, this, and this. You violated that because you brought your personal feelings into our workplace. Get out of here. I don't have a problem with that. I don't think anybody really should. But for the Attorney General to basically say we're going to open a civil rights investigation against you for refusing to do this, that is completely out of bounds. You are literally coming in and telling these businesses and employees what, type of political activity they can or cannot refuse to do. It's preposterous to the nth degree. And this fits with the pattern of this administration. We'll recall you take local and small incidents and you blow them up into the most ludicrous prosecution by the federal government. They open an investigation when some girl at a Florida university, approached, yelled at, and touched a guy who was wearing an IDF t-shirt in the gym. Florida expelled her. Okay, fine, whatever. Maybe she violated the student code of conduct. I'm not an expert or whatever on that. That's a local matter. They opened a civil rights investigation into that. I've talked about the coffee shop case previously, where again, there was some coffee shop in Los Angeles and some shit happened. They were pro-Palestine or whatever, and some people who were there claimed that somebody said something nasty to them about being Jewish. I don't support that. I think that's egregious behavior. That's a local matter for Los Angeles PD and for the state of California. It is not a matter for the Attorney General and Civil Rights Investigation. And it's the same thing with, this is the department, I've talked about how the Department of Anti-Racism has become the Department of Anti-Semitism under this administration. Now it will be the Department of Policing. Everybody in the entire world, if you don't do how we want you to act, we're going to open a civil rights investigation and a prosecution against you. It is, I'm so viscerally angry about it because for me, it's the hypocrisy. Yeah. You can't, because for the libs, they always believe this stuff, okay? And they were pretty open about it. Nobody lied to you. By the way, they lost the election in part, I think, because of that. And I think that's a good thing. I think a lot of people stood up and said, no, we're not dealing with this bullshit anymore. But then to run against it and immediately, less than 9 months or whatever into 9 months into the administration, to repeating, can you imagine if Obama or any of these other people announced this? Even Masterpiece, let's say it. That was a Colorado state case. It wasn't federal. It didn't involve Eric Holder. That would have been a whole other ballgame, in my opinion. So yeah, I don't know. I'm so infuriated. It shows, I've never believed Richard Hanania's theory also, by the way, about elite human capital more. He's right. You have a bunch of literal cretinous idiots who just mindlessly repeat mantras about Trump, and then they find themselves in these positions of immense power, and look at the consequences. No consistency. It would be a joke, again, if they didn't have literal prosecutorial authority. They could destroy us, Krystal, if they wanted. They could destroy any of you. By the way, at least we are media. We have money, okay? We have insurance and all this other stuff. That's right. You're a normal-ass Office Depot employee, you're fucked if they come against you. Yeah. Even if you win, who cares if you have $1 million in legal bills?
Well, that's exactly right, because even if the case is spurious and it gets thrown out, ultimately, meanwhile, you have the whole force of the federal government and their legal apparatus coming after you. And if you're a regular person, like, your financial and your life in general are going to be destroyed.
And United States of America versus so-and-so for refusing to print a poster. Right. Even if they investigate you. Do you guys have any ideas how much these types of lawyers cost? I'm talking about $1,000, $2,000 per hour for expertise in First Amendment law. I'm not joking.
Mention the way your life is upended, the way that you're doxxed, the way you're put on blast, that, suddenly you are a public figure, whether you wanted to be or not, because you refuse to print a poster, and by the way, Charlie Kirk fans are not a protected class of people, to apply under civil rights law. Let's be clear about that too. But the fact that it's ridiculous does not matter. And also, look, the Supreme Court has also given them basically everything that they've wanted. They're on a string of victories by and large, through the shadow docket, where they give no reasoning or rationale for their decisions. But clearly, John Roberts either agrees with the direction or has decided that he doesn't want to provoke a conflict with this administration, and so has basically decided to back down and give them everything that they want. So even if on its face you feel like the case has no merit, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to win. And it certainly doesn't mean that they're not going to destroy your life in the process. So, no, it truly is wild to see. And your point about the way that the MO of this administration is to use some small incident or to invent an incident and blow it up and use it as an excuse for a power grab and a crackdown is spot on. I mean, look at LA. Like, LA had protests. Yes, there was some violence. Did you need to send in not only the National Guard, thousands of them, but active duty Marines for that? No, you didn't. Here in DC, Big Balls gets mugged. Next thing you know, you've got National Guard, you've got MRAPs at Union Station. Even we're going to talk about Venezuela. I mean, it's kind of a similar thing. Like, they're inventing the idea that these boats that are coming are drug traffickers. Very little of the drugs that come into this country come from Venezuela, as Saagar actually laid out last time that we covered this. So this is their MO. Think of the way they've gone after universities, right? Columbia had protests. It was, there was a thing. So basically took over that university, destroyed their Middle Eastern Studies department, are stripping them of funding, like forcing them to fire professors, et cetera. This is what they do. And so another significant thing that happened yesterday, which they're clearly trying to use Charlie Kirk's murder to paint a portrait of every left-wing organization as basically like violent and out for blood. And we're going to use the excuse of this for a mass crackdown. And Stephen Miller laid this out explicitly when he was talking to J.D. Vance on what was Charlie Kirk's podcast. Let's go ahead and take a listen to this.
Walk me through at a high level, like what you and I have been working on, what the whole administration has been working on to try to make sure that we don't reward and promote this craziness.
Yes. So it's an excellent question. I said this before, but it bears repeating. The last message that Charlie sent me was, I think it was just the day before we lost him, which is that we need to have an organized strategy to go after the left-wing organizations that are promoting violence in this country. And I will write those words onto my heart and I will carry them out. We are going to channel all of the anger that we have over the organized campaign that led to this assassination to uproot and dismantle these terrorist networks. And with God as my witness, we are going to use every resource we have at the Department of Justice, Homeland Security, and throughout this government to identify, disrupt, dismantle, and destroy these networks and make America safe again for the American people. It will happen, and we will do it in Charlie's name.
Also, by the way, Attorney General Pam Bondi has now tried to clarify her remarks.
Oh, yeah.
I think this fits all together. Let's put this up here on the screen just to show you the legalese that is all happening. She says, hate speech that crosses the line into threats of violence is not protected by the First Amendment. It is a crime. Far too long, we've watched the radical left normalize threats, call for assassinations, cheer on political violence. That era is over. Under 18 U.S.C. 875C, it is a federal crime to, quote, transmit any communication containing any threat to kidnap any person or any threat to injure the person or other. Likewise, 18 U.S.C. 876 and 18 U.S.C. 115 make it a felony to threaten public officials, members of Congress, or their families. Free speech protects ideas, debate, even dissent, but it does not and will never protect violence. It is clear that this violent rhetoric is designed to silence others from voicing conservative ideals. We will never be silenced, not our families, our freedoms. Never for Charlie's legacy will not be erased by fear or intimidation. But to be very, very clear here, she is still using the line hate speech. There is no such thing legally as hate speech, as Charlie himself laid out. And what she's talking about there, the extremely narrow definition under those crimes, which they lay out, any communication containing any threat to kidnap any person or any threat to injure the person or another. Even in the egregious examples, which we showed everybody yesterday, where people said, I'm happy that he's dead. That does not fall under that definition. That is a conversation instead for employers, for society, for all of us. And as I said yesterday, I said many of those people I think should absolutely be fired. However, it is not the role of the government here in any way to be bringing cases against them and be telling people, specifically employees, suing them for civil rights investigation. One of the things, this great irony, Charlie himself spoke at length, I know a lot of liberals have attacked him about this, about the Civil Rights Act, and specifically about the overreach and basically the new Constitution that was invented after 1964 of an entire new realm of case law, which delves with discrimination and hate speech and going after people for violating this or that. This is exactly the type of overreach which led him and me and many other people to a similar conclusion that, look, at the very least, we have to grapple with the fact that this entire new code of social law began to exist and has since morphed from originally what we thought would be the endpoint of Ibrahim X. Kendi thought into now Department of Anti-Racism, stuff. You talked earlier about the universities. I have no love for the universities. Columbia, screw you. Harvard, screw you. Why? Not because you're anti-Semitic. It's because you're bilking people. In my opinion, your culture and all of that has done nothing for the elites of this country. If anything, it's turned them 10 times worse. You're much more socially destructive than any some dumbass protest or whatever about Palestine. How should we destroy them if we wanted to? What would that even look like? It would be destroying their endowment hedge fund operations and, the rise of the DEI administrator and all of that, which is bilking the American taxpayer and putting these people horrifically in debt. That applies completely across the board. All of us can have an argument about that one way or the other. But the point is not that it has anything to do with the goddamn Middle Eastern Studies Department. Mm-hmm. And that is what upsets me the most. It also gets to...
Well, they don't want to get rid of the DEI.
Yeah, they want DEI
to redefine
for Israel.
The DEI.
Right, DEI now stands for Israel.
Yeah.
Yeah, diversity, equity in Israel. Okay, yeah. I mean, I'm not for that, okay? I saw this shit coming from a mile away ever since October 7th. That's the first time that they turned on cancel culture. And this gets to a bigger theory. Forgive me because this stuff gets deep into conservative thought. If you go back to some of my original involvement in the conservative movement, there was this debate between libertarians and national conservatives. It was about this idea of using state power for ends. I still believe that as a principle. And I'll give you an example when I talk about China and I talk about industrial policy, intelligent policy, which is used specifically to engineer what I think are good ends, tax policy and others, because the alternative is where we are right now, where we already effectively have state industrial policy for the stupidest industries like hedge funds and all this others. We might as well use it for more productive ends. And specifically, socially, what I think we could all arrive to, let's say we should prioritize the American family. We should prioritize being able to build a house. We should prioritize having great business and products which are built here in the United States of America. What they have done and what I find so viscerally betrayed on is they have instead said that we must engineer state power to use for our, not even coalitional interests, but for the interests of a foreign government here in the case of Israel, and now in particular to actually go after fellow citizens. And that's the preposterous nature. It's also the perversion of the idea. So I'm not a libertarian, and I still believe in the ability of the state to actually use tax policy, industrial policy, to have intelligence, as we did in the lead up to World War II. But this right here, this is the worst of us. It's exactly what happened after 9/11.
Well, and the part of it that speaks to the sense of betrayal is how much more difficult will it be to make the argument against libertarians?
The libertarians are going to win now. Do you guys understand that? That's what pisses me off. The libertarians will win. Do you know how many Americans now are going to say, fuck tariffs? I did an event yesterday with Chris Murphy, and I asked him, I said, hey, Senator, he's much more neoliberal. So I was like, hey, what do you think about tariffs now? Because from my perspective, I've watched the neoliberals, they're all in on tariffs or a tax. All tariffs are bad. They're right back to 2010 thought. And he's like, well, we can say tariff. He didn't answer my question at all, dodged it completely. And I was like, oh no. I was like, when the Dems come back, I don't know how they'll ever be able to do a tariff again.
Even on antitrust policy, because if you have a government that you have a semblance of like either political neutrality or the policy is going to be used to, create American jobs and make sure they're good paying and whatever, then you can feel comfortable having a strong antitrust department that's not going to be just like weaponizing that as a threat to coerce like cultural ends or like to, make sure you're towing the line on Israel. But in fact, what we have is, an administration that is using every weapon that they have to coerce on Israel, to make sure that their cultural policy is pursued, to make sure that these businesses are like paying appropriate tribute to Trump. I mean, that's what a lot of it is for. It's just like, what's in it for B? There's a big corruption scandal with regard to the UAE that the New York Times broke yesterday that we're going to try to get to this week. But, that saps the confidence out of the ability for the government to truly be an actor on behalf of the American people versus in the interests of these particular groups. And it is a good segue into the next conversation about Israel, because while like Stephen Miller there, he's not only talking about left-wing groups that are pro-Palestine. We know that that will be a lot of where the hammer falls. I mean, the Democratic Party in general, the left certainly have been the fiercest and the earliest advocates for Palestine. So if you are marshaling the federal government to crush left-wing dissent, crush left-wing groups, just by the nature of what you're doing, you are going to be having a disproportionate impact on the pro-Palestine conversation.
Yeah, and I'll even focus on that. I mean, one of the things that JD floated in his speech yesterday was like the tax status of the Open Society Foundation. I'm like, okay, I mean, listen, you're not going to see any crocodile tears from me about the Open Society Foundation. But the point about law is to say what? Is to say, actually, a lot of these nonprofits are basically political money laundering by the billionaire class, right? But instead, it becomes like, oh, these, and by the way, look, yes, it's true. Many of these left-wing billionaires have funded the stupidest shit possible. But the claim that was originally made, actually, about The Nation magazine does not appear to be correct. And so this also gets to this fantasy, which I have said so many times here. There is a fantasy that people think that this is organized in the same way that the Weather Underground or the KKK was. I wish it were so. It would be 10 times easier to disrupt and destroy. It would be so much easier. The Weather Underground was 25 different freaks. Prosecute 3, get a few non-prosecution agreements or whatever with the rest. They plead guilty. A couple of them fled the country and were basically silent, I think, for like 25 years. It disappeared. No, we're dealing with something 10 times worse, which is this, you're doing your monologue on nihilism and black belt. That is people sitting at home getting addicted to pornography, weed, to like every degenerate impulse that the internet can serve you, and then taking it out in extreme forces and assassinating Charlie Kirk, and or in the case of the Thomas Matthew Crooks person, these school shooters. That's the actual societal problem that we have to deal with.
Yeah.
I wish there were easy government solutions. I wish the FBI could take that down.
Disaffected men with no sense of meaning or purpose, desperately trying to make their lives matter. That's what we're talking about. And it is an epidemic, and it is not going to be easily solved, because is there anything on the horizon that you see that's going to create like a pathway to a sense of like hope and prosperity and meaning and purpose for any of these young men, whatever the ideological valence they hold? No, there's nothing on that horizon. And then the accelerant of those internet spaces is only going to become more and more twisted. So that's part of why the landscape is so dark.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.